Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 79th episode of the Inbox, starting off with a question from Shiva Balasingham, saying, do you think it would be possible to power down and allow your craft to drift from space down to the atmosphere of a planet as to not appear on anyone's scanners as you approach the planet, then once you're close to the ground, suddenly power up and start blasting? It's an interesting idea. I think there's two issues there. One is not all the ships in this game are really all that aerodynamic, so if you're talking about doing this in an Aurora, you're not going to be able to necessarily just cruise in. You're probably going to end up losing the directionality you want, so you might end up tumbling, or you might end up just doing a nosedive that you might not recover from. Another part of the problem there is that the shielding is what's going to help protect you from the atmospheric burn-up effect. So if you're turning down the power on your craft, you're no longer going to have shields, and you may burn up. So you may be able to lower some systems, like turn off your weapons and lower your signature some, but I don't think you're going to survive if you turn off all of the power. Mike F. says, I think we're getting close, or going to see evidence of other alien races in Vanduul space and technology. I could see the Cathrak being a big bad at a much later date. The thing I'm curious about is, what's pushing the Vanduul out of Vanduul space? Since they're loosely based on the Vandals who invaded Rome, it turns out they were being pushed on the backside by the Huns, a much larger threat. Curious, is CIG going in that same direction? It's an interesting thought. Ultimately, we don't really know. I agree that I think the Cathrak is going to be kind of a next generation of bad guys that we're going to end up having to face. I think the Vanduul, though, the way that they're doing is, you got to remember, the Vanduul operate in like clan systems. So, they're trying to strike out and make what they can on their own. So it's maybe not necessarily that there's something pushing the Vandals into our space. What it actually is that the Vanduul are trying to expand, so they all have a larger foothold. Maybe there's a super powerful Vanduul clan that's pushing some of the smaller ones out. We don't really know the backstory. We'll have to kind of wait and see, but I think there's other possibilities there that probably fall within the Vanduul line as opposed to something pushing the Vanduul themselves. Spindog says, also another question, what would you think of power armor that makes a person a small juggernaut in terms of fighting on the ground, like having the ability to take some ship weapons on the lower side of the damage scale, and having them mag booted to the outside of larger ships, cutting into them and making them hard to get the way they are seen as valuable? Would love your input. I don't think the way you're describing it is going to happen. We know that Titan armor is going to be a thing, but that's more of like an extension of an FPS gameplay. Somebody is in a lot of armor, they're hard to kill, you need larger scale weapons, you need grenades to do things, but they're still ultimately going to be holding like probably larger scale handheld weaponry. I don't think we're in a situation where you're going to be putting like a bulldog on the arm of some power armor and be able to shoot at ships and stuff. I think when you start getting to that scale, you're probably talking about like handheld railguns and stuff like that. So I don't think you're going to see a situation where you're mag booted to the outside of a ship. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be smaller scale, large scale FPS type of suit. And I think that's probably the extension of what we're going to see there. Jesset121 says, hey STL, how do you think the 890 is going to stack up against the Polaris? Whilst I realize they are two very different ships, I have my doubts about how long the Polaris can stand up in a prolonged engagement. As 24 torpedoes is only 6 full salvos of the larger crew size will make it more difficult to fully crew. Asking because I'm thinking about purchasing one or the other and I'm leaning towards the 890. It's a smaller crew size, and capital pylon make it an attractive alternative to something which is going to be a large money sink to operate at full potential. Thanks in advance. And thanks for being the best Damn Star Citizen channel. Thank you. Very kind. To answer your question, I don't think the 890 jump stands a chance against the Polaris. You're talking about a luxury touring / exploration ship, and yes, it does have the point defense system, which should do a decent job of keeping away from the Polaris's torpedoes. The Polaris, though, has a bunch of torpedoes, and you shouldn't need to land a lot of them to do significant damage to the 890 jump. There's other factors there as well. The Polaris has capital class shielding. It's also got 5 different turrets that have 2 size 4 weapons on each of them. It's got a missile turret location, and it's got an unmanned turret location. The weaponry outside of the torpedoes may not be like Idris class or Javelin class, but you know what? It's not bad either. 2 size 4 weapons is big, and you're talking about 10 of them on there, plus, missiles, plus torpedoes, plus the fact that it's known to be fast, plus the fact that it's got good shields. And that's what it's supposed to have. It's supposed to have good shields and less armor. The problem is, I don't see anything about the 890 jump that makes me think it's ever going to wear down the shields on the Polaris. You're talking about a warship versus another, like, kind of luxury cool ship to have, but it's honestly not going to be much of a fight. In the battle of those two Doritos, the 890 should win just about every time. Or, no, the Polaris should win just about every time. You got me. You almost got me saying that you should get the 890, but no, that's not the way it is. It's the Polaris. Jackal Marine says, STL, will ships be options for cargo? Do you think it'll be possible for large ships with hangars or large enough spaces to bring ships from one market to another and even sell them like cargo to for cargo yourselves to other players? Yeah, I absolutely think that's going to be an option. Especially if you're doing customization to ships, you might be able to say, you could go buy this totally stock cutlass, but I'm selling you a cutlass that I've personally upgraded and is a much more potent killing machine. Like that's going to probably be a job that people are going to do. Instead of having somebody else like just pay it and do it on their own, they could spend a little bit premium and get it already done from you. So I think that's an option. Shuttling ships will probably be an option. Like ships like the Idris, the Endeavor, if we ever get like a pocket carrier, like the moving of ships around is going to be something that's desirable. There's some ideas that it may actually be a function of the whole series, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, that's absolutely going to be a thing. It's going to be more about what limitations you have. So, what you're talking about there makes sense, and I think you can count on it. Samuel Gerardo says, hey STL, love your work. Do you think it'll be possible to evade heat and electronic-seeking missiles by turning off a ship? Imagine having pirates launch too many missiles at once to deal with using traditional countermeasures, so you activate boost and afterburner to pull the sharpest corner you can before going cold. In theory, what you're talking about makes sense, and I think in theory it could work, but the problem is going to be what mechanics they have in place. If you are boosting and burning hot trying to run and then you just cut it off, I'm guessing your engines aren't going from hot to cold immediately. So there's probably like a little bit of a cooldown there. Now, like, could you say, I'm going to boost up the speed, get up to cruise speed, then I'm going to go ahead and hit decouple, and I'm just going to coast at that speed and while getting cold while the missiles can't gain any ground? I think that makes sense, and I think that's something that we could see. So it's going to be more about the way it's actually done. Honestly, the way you should probably do it is you want to get up to speed as fast as possible. You want to make a maneuver. You make the maneuver, you drop the flare, you get back up to speed, then you go cold. Because then all of a sudden what you've done is you've changed your vector, you've created a distance, and you've put a hotter target in front of you and the missile. So I think in conjunction with other things what you're talking about is functional, but just doing it alone is probably not enough. And our last two questions are patron questions, starting off with Jiraiya. Says, will we have planet-side natural disasters? For instance, I wanted to be a storm chaser, perhaps sell weather data. I think in the science world, yeah, you can probably do some storm chasing. You might be able to sell the data. There's been some lore about questions about how things happen on planets. So yeah, I think you could do some of that. I'm not sure if it's going to necessarily be a real career, but you're going to need to see how much information you can get from it and how valuable that information is in the verse. And then you also ask, will star bases and places such as hangars, airports, and government buildings have loudspeaker banter? I'm counting on it. We saw some of it with the initial hangars that were implemented. I think it was Wingman that recorded most of that stuff, but while it's gone for now, I think it is going to absolutely be coming back, especially at like spaceports. Captain Greginski says, what are your thoughts on having simple mini-games like checkers and chess near the cockpit bridge so that players can sit down and do something if they have a couple minutes of quantum flight and their ship is running well? Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen some of that already. We've got an air hockey table in the Javelin. They've talked about a basketball court. We've seen the pool table. I mean, there's already some mini-games that look like they're in place, so I would be shocked if we didn't have something in place there. Like the Constellation little dining area, you can probably play some games on. So I think they've put pretty much everything they need to in like the grabby hands and player interaction system. So I think the building blocks are there, and I think there's a known desire. So while it's probably not going to be immediate, I think it's something that's coming soon. So that's it for this episode of The Inbox. If you have questions, get them in. Otherwise, stay tuned for more, and have a wonderful day. Take care.